You really thought I'd spend my 20s waiting around while you figure your life out? She asked during my cousin's wedding reception while dancing with her ex right in front of me. I quietly left without creating a scene. 8 months later, she called crying after discovering her ex had proposed to someone else during their vacation in Greece. You really thought I'd spend my 20s waiting around while you figure your life out? She said it loud enough for the table next to us to hear. Meredith, my girlfriend of 3 years, standing at the edge of the dance floor at my cousin Mitchell's wedding reception, her hand loosely tangled with Preston's, her ex, looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. I remember the exact song playing. Some slow Sinatra cover the band had shifted into. Warm lighting. Round tables with white centerpieces. My aunt dabbing her eyes near the cake station because she'd always been emotional at weddings. And Meredith, in a green dress she'd bought specifically for this night, looking at me with something that wasn't even cruelty. It was impatience. Like I was a problem she'd been quietly tolerating for longer than she should have. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. Then I looked at Preston, who had the decency, barely, to glance away. Then I set my glass of water down on the nearest table, buttoned my jacket, and walked toward the exit. No argument. No scene. No dramatic speech. I just left. And the terrible part, the part that kept me awake for weeks after, wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't the people who heard. It wasn't even losing her. It was how quiet everything felt on the drive home. Like something had already been over for a long time, and I was just the last one to receive the memo. 8 months later, she called me crying so hard she could barely get a full sentence out. But by then, I had nothing left to offer her. Not anger. Not comfort. Not even the satisfaction of saying I told you so. Just silence. Let me tell you why that night hit the way it did. Mitchell's wedding was a big deal for our family. He was the first of our generation to get married. Proper ceremony, venue out in Connecticut, 200 guests, the whole thing. My grandmother had flown in from Florida. My parents had been talking about it for 3 months. My cousin Daryl had driven up from Philadelphia just to be there. It was supposed to be a good night. I'd been looking forward to it, genuinely. Not because I'm the type of person who gets sentimental at weddings. I'm not. But because things between Meredith and me had been tense for a while, and I told myself that a night like this might reset something. Get us back to a version of ourselves that felt easier. Remind her that we were good together when the pressure wasn't on. That sounds naive in hindsight. It was. We'd been together since we were 23. 3 years. Long enough that her parents knew my name and my mother had quietly started making comments about ring shopping. Long enough that we'd had the serious conversations about where we'd live, about what we both wanted, about timelines. The timelines were where things started to crack. Meredith had always moved faster than me. Not in a reckless way. She was smart, driven, had a good job in marketing at a mid-sized firm in Manhattan. But she had this vision of what her life was supposed to look like by 27, 28, and she'd started measuring everything against that vision, including me. I was 30, building something real with a small logistics consulting firm I'd co-founded with a friend 2 years earlier. It wasn't flashy yet. We were stable, growing slowly, doing good work. But slowly was a word Meredith had started hearing differently in the last year. I didn't realize how differently until the wedding. I didn't realize, either, that she'd stayed in contact with Preston. Preston, who she dated for 8 months before we got together. Preston, who she described as emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, the kind of person who made everything feel exciting and nothing feel secure. He showed up at Mitchell's reception as a +1 for one of the bride's college friends. And something in Meredith's eyes changed the moment she spotted him across the room. I noticed it. I told myself I was imagining it. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I'm not some guy who had everything figured out at 25. I wasn't driving a BMW or closing million-dollar deals or posting gym photos on Instagram. I was a regular person building something real in a way that took time. I grew up in a middle-class family in New Jersey, went to a state school, studied supply chain management, worked for a corporate firm for 5 years before deciding I wanted to build something for myself. Saved carefully, made disciplined decisions, launched the consulting firm at 28 with my friend Lionel, who I'd met at my second job. By the time of Mitchell's wedding, we had 7 clients, a small but reliable revenue stream, and a contract in negotiation with a regional distributor that would have been our biggest deal yet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and it was mine. Meredith knew all of this. She'd been supportive in the beginning, genuinely excited, asking questions about clients, celebrating small wins with me over takeout and bad television. That version of her felt like a partner. But somewhere in the last 8 or 9 months, the questions had changed. They'd gotten sharper, less curious, more evaluating. When do you think the firm will really start making serious money? Do you ever think about just going back to corporate and having a guaranteed salary? Preston just got a VP title at his company. Did I tell you that? That last one, she'd mentioned it twice. Casually, both times watching my face for a reaction. I never gave her one. But I heard it. I heard all of it. I just kept building. Preston was wearing a well-fitted navy suit. That's the first thing I noticed. I'm being honest. He looked good, confident. The kind of person who walks into a room and adjusts the temperature slightly. He was with a group near the bar, laughing easily, and I could see from 20 feet away why someone might find that energy magnetic. Meredith spotted him about 40 minutes into the reception. We were at our table, a round of 8 that included Daryl, his girlfriend Sonia, and a few of Mitchell's friends from college. The food hadn't come out yet. Everyone was in that loose, pre-dinner conversation mode, the kind where the drinks are flowing and nobody's committed to any particular discussion. And then Meredith said, "Oh my God, is that Preston?" Her voice had a note in it I hadn't heard in a long time. Lit up, surprised but not quite surprised enough. "Where?" I said. She nodded toward the bar. "Small world," I said. "I had no idea he'd be here," she said. She said it to me, but she was still looking at him. Daryl glanced at me sideways. Daryl has always been good at reading rooms. I let it go. About 15 minutes later, Meredith excused herself to say hello. That was the phrase she used. Say hello. Like it was a brief, polite acknowledgement between two people with shared history and nothing more. She was gone for 25 minutes. I know because Sonia made a point of tracking it. She leaned over halfway through and quietly said, "She's been over there a while." "I know," I said. "You okay?" "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. But the alternative was making a scene at Mitchell's wedding, and that wasn't something I was willing to do. When she came back, she was flushed in the way people get when they've been laughing too hard or feeling something they weren't expecting. She sat down, picked up her wine, and said, "Sorry, we just got to talking. You know how it is." I nodded. The food arrived. I ate. Dinner was fine on the surface and unbearable underneath. Meredith kept glancing across the room. She laughed a little too loudly at something Daryl said, the kind of forced brightness people perform when they're trying to seem present. She refilled her wine glass twice before the entree was cleared. And Preston, for his part, made his way over during the dessert course. He came to say hello to the table. That's how he framed it. Very smooth. Introduced himself to Daryl, made a joke I don't remember, shook my hand with the practiced firmness of someone who'd learned to make a strong first impression. "You must be the boyfriend," he said to me. "That's right," I said. He smiled. "She talks about you." I didn't say anything. He moved on. Meredith watched him go. Then the band shifted to dancing music, and something in her posture changed. She became restless in a way I recognized. That particular energy of someone who wants something and is calculating how to get it without openly asking. "I'm going to dance," she said. "Okay," I said. "Come with me." I looked at her for a moment. In a few minutes, she went without me. I want to be clear, I wasn't punishing her. I genuinely thought she'd dance with Sonia or with one of the bride's friends, and I'd join when I'd finished my drink and collected myself. That was my plan. But by the time I looked up, she was dancing with Preston. Not inappropriately, not grinding or anything that would have looked obviously out of line. Just closely, laughing, his hand on her back, her face tilted up toward him in a way that had nothing to do with the music. Daryl put a hand on my shoulder. "Hey," he said quietly. "I see it," I said. I watched for another minute. My aunt walked past, and her eyes moved from Meredith on the dance floor to me at the table, and something in her expression shifted. That particular adult recognition of witnessing a situation that calls for compassion, but not intervention. I stood up. I wasn't going to make a scene. I want to be absolutely clear about that. I wasn't going to walk onto that dance floor and make Mitchell's wedding about me. That wasn't who I was. That wasn't the night I was willing to have. But I was going to get my coat. I walked toward the coat room, which took me near the edge of the dance floor. And that's when Meredith saw me moving and stepped away from Preston and came toward me with a look on her face that I couldn't fully read. Guilty, maybe, or defensive, already constructing the version of events she'd use later. "Hey, are you leaving?" "Getting some air," I said. "You're upset." "I'm getting some air, Meredith." And then, I don't know if it was the wine or Preston being 6 feet away and watching, or some frustration that had been building longer than I realized. She said it. You really thought I'd spend my 20s waiting around while you figure your life out. The music didn't stop. Life didn't pause. But the 3 people nearest to us on the edge of the dance floor definitely heard. One of the bride's friends looked away immediately in that reflexive way people do when they've accidentally witnessed something private. Preston had the grace to take a step back. I looked at Meredith for a long moment. Her chin was slightly raised. Her jaw was set. She was waiting for something. An argument, maybe, or reassurance, or anger. Something she could push against. I didn't give her any of it. I picked up my coat. And I walked out. No last words. No slammed door. No meaningful look over my shoulder. I just left. The Uber ride home took 42 minutes. I sat in the back and watched the Connecticut highway give way to city lights, and I didn't think about her even once. I thought about Mitchell. I thought about the contract we were close to closing. I thought about how cold it had gotten, and whether I needed to find my heavier jacket before winter really set in. That was it. That was the whole ride. She texted at 12:47 a.m. We should talk. I turned my phone face down and went to sleep. The next morning she called twice. I let both go to voicemail. The messages were short, slightly halting. The voice of someone who'd sobered up and was trying to figure out which version of the previous night's events was most defensible. First message, hey, last night got weird. I think we both said things. Well, I said something I don't know. Call me. Second message, 2 hours later. Are you seriously not picking up? That's very mature. I called her back that evening. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. She apologized for the comment, sort of. The kind of apology that's structurally an apology, but contains enough qualifications that it barely qualifies. I shouldn't have said it like that, but I've been feeling this way for a while, and I think we need to talk about where we're actually headed. That kind of thing. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't tell her the comment had humiliated me in front of people I cared about at a moment that was supposed to be joyful. I just said, I need a few days. She agreed. The few days turned into a week. The week turned into 2. During those 2 weeks, I heard from Daryl twice, checking in, not pushing. He's good that way. He asked once if I wanted to talk about it, and I said not yet. And he said okay, and we talked about the football game instead like adults. I heard from Sonia once too. She was more direct. For what it's worth, she said, she was texting someone at the dinner table before he even showed up. I didn't want to say anything during the night, but I figured you should know. I didn't ask who. I already knew. When Meredith and I finally talked again, about 16 days after the wedding, she was different. Quieter. More careful with her words. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking. She said she felt like we'd grown in different directions, and maybe we both needed to be honest about that. I asked her if she'd been in contact with Preston since the wedding. She paused just long enough. We've talked a little, she said. Okay, I said. It's not what you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything, I said. I'm asking a question. Another pause. He's just someone I can talk to, she said. Meredith, I said, I don't think this is working. She didn't object. That was the part that stung, actually, not in a devastating way, but in the way of confirmation. She didn't object. She made a small sound, something between a sigh and an acknowledgement, and then she said, maybe you're right. We ended things that night. No dramatic fight. No final accounting. No tearful inventory of everything we'd meant to each other. Just a quiet mutual admission that something had been broken for longer than either of us wanted to admit. I hung up, stood in my kitchen for a while, made coffee. Then I opened my laptop and got back to the proposal I'd been drafting for the distribution contract. That was that. The weeks after were strange in the way that breakups always are, the particular silence of a space where someone used to be. Her things came back through a mutual friend in a bag, neatly folded. I didn't see her in person. I heard through Daryl that she and Preston had started seeing each other officially, confirmed, within 3 weeks of the wedding. 3 weeks. I did the math. The math was uncomfortable. Mutual friends began navigating the way they always do after a breakup. The careful text message timing, the vague check-ins, the way conversations shifted when her name came up. Cheryl, a friend we'd shared, called me once to say she was sorry about how things went. She used the phrase "you deserve better" twice. I thanked her and changed the subject. Social media was its own particular experience. Meredith had never been a heavy poster, but suddenly she was. Photos started appearing: dinner at a restaurant I recognized, weekend trip upstate, a group shot at someone's birthday where Preston's arm was visible at the edge of the frame. She looked good in all of them. Bright, Present. The version of someone who wants you to see that they are thriving. I muted her. Not blocked. Muted. There's a difference. Blocking announces something. Muting is just taking care of yourself quietly. I moved on. Or started to. There's a version of this story where the next few months involve a dramatic reinvention, extreme weight loss, a new wardrobe, some transformational experience that announces itself loudly to the world. That's not what happened. What happened was quieter and, I think, more real. Lionel and I closed the distribution contract in November. It was the biggest deal we'd landed since launching the firm. Not life-changing money, not yet, but significant, validating in a way that mattered. We brought on 2 new employees. I got to call my father and tell him the number over the phone and hear the particular silence he does when he's proud but doesn't know how to say it outright. That silence meant more to me than anything Meredith had ever said about my trajectory. I started waking up earlier, not for discipline or performance, just because I was sleeping better and waking up before my alarm started feeling natural. I went to the gym consistently for the first time in over a year. I started cooking again, something I'd let slide during the relationship. Small things. Routine things. I read more. Enrolled in a course on financial modeling I'd been putting off for 8 months. Had dinner with Daryl and Sonia on a Thursday night and laughed so hard at something Daryl said that I knocked over my water glass and didn't care. Life was small and good. Meanwhile, Meredith and Preston were, apparently, doing spectacularly. I know this because Cheryl, who had never quite figured out which side of the line she was on, still occasionally mentioned things in passing. She wasn't malicious about it. She genuinely seemed to think she was keeping me connected to a social world we'd shared. But the information landed whether I wanted it or not. They'd gone to a concert in Brooklyn. They'd done a weekend in the Berkshires. Preston had taken her to dinner at a restaurant that had a waiting list of 2 months. He'd apparently introduced her to his family over the holidays. It all looked exactly like the relationship she'd wanted. Fast. Exciting. Certain. I heard all of it and felt nothing mostly. A small, distant ache that belonged more to the idea of what I thought we were building than to her specifically. Grief for a future that never quite existed. I didn't wish them badly. I want to say that honestly. Whatever Meredith and Preston were doing with their lives was their business. I'd closed that door, gently, and I wasn't standing outside it pressing my ear against the wood. I was building something. New client in January. A small regional manufacturer that came through a referral. Another in February, larger, through a connection Lionel had been cultivating for almost a year. By spring, the firm had grown enough that we were starting to have real conversations about what the next stage looked like. Hiring, structure, investment. I was present for all of it in a way I hadn't been in years. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Present. Like I'd been slightly elsewhere for a long time, divided, half-occupied, always measuring myself against something outside myself. And now I was just here, in my own life, building. Spring passed. Early summer arrived. And then, around June, the Greece photos appeared. Not on Meredith's account. She'd apparently gone quiet online. But through the mutual friend ecosystem, the information surfaced. Preston and Meredith had taken a trip to Greece. Santorini. The photos that filtered back to me secondhand were exactly what you'd imagine. White buildings, blue water, the kind of light that makes everything look like a dream. Everyone in our shared social orbit drew the obvious conclusion. It was the kind of trip people take when they're about to get engaged. Cheryl texted me directly, and I'll be honest, it was almost admirably oblivious. I think Preston might propose on this trip. How are you doing with all this? I stared at that text for a moment. Then I typed, I'm good. Thanks for asking. And went back to reviewing the quarterly numbers for our biggest client. Here's what I didn't know. While I was reviewing those quarterly numbers, I didn't know what Preston had been like behind the polished surface of that navy suit and the easy laugh and the VP title. I didn't know what Meredith had started noticing 3 months in. The way his phone went face down at dinner. The last-minute cancellations with thin explanations. The way she had to ask twice before he'd commit to anything, even small things, even a Tuesday dinner. I didn't know because she hadn't told anyone. Pride, maybe. Or the very human unwillingness to admit that the thing you burned down your stable life for might not be what you thought. I learned most of this later. But the shape of it had apparently been visible to some of the people around them for months. Sonia, who had expanded her social circle since she and Daryl had gotten more serious, knew someone who ran in Preston's wider friend group. And that person, in the way that information always eventually travels, had mentioned, casually, in passing, that Preston had been on and off with someone else before Meredith. That off had not been very firm. That he was, in the words used, the kind of person who maintains options. Daryl told me this over drinks in late May. I absorbed it. Didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel vindicated. Just something heavy and sad settling in, the way it does when you see the ending of something before it arrives. She's going to get hurt, I said. Probably, Daryl said. He refilled his glass. Are you going to reach out to her? No, I said. Yeah, he said. That's what I thought. Then Greece happened. The trip was 10 days, from what I pieced together afterward. Santorini, then Athens. The kind of itinerary that takes planning, costs real money, signals intention. Meredith had apparently been quietly excited in the weeks leading up to it. Cheryl told me this later, in the aftermath, with the tone of someone who suddenly understood that the things they'd thought were wonderful were actually kindling. She'd told Cheryl she had a feeling about the trip. She'd bought a new dress specifically for a dinner they had reserved. She'd mentioned, in the way you mention things you're trying not to jinx, that she thought this might be it. It wasn't it. Preston proposed during the trip, but not to Meredith. To a woman named Sonia, different Sonia, not Daryl's girlfriend, a woman he'd apparently been seeing, with more consistency than anyone in Meredith's circle had realized, for the better part of 2 years. There had been overlap with his time with Meredith. There had been, as it turned out, quite a bit of overlap. He proposed at dinner on their last night in Greece. He'd apparently planned it for weeks. Meredith found out the same way everyone in the modern world finds out about things they weren't supposed to see, through someone else's Instagram. A photo appeared, a ring, a caption, and Meredith, sitting in an airport on the way home from a trip she'd been so certain about, understood in one scroll exactly what the last 8 months had actually been. The reaction spread through the social circle quickly, in that way that shock always spreads. Cheryl called 3 people within 20 minutes. Daryl heard through Sonia, his Sonia, who'd seen it through someone else. By the time it reached me, it had passed through at least 4 people. I didn't look up the post. I didn't need to. I just sat with the information for a moment. Not triumphant. Not satisfied. Not sad for her in the way I might have been if she'd simply been unlucky with a decent person. Just still. Sometimes the truth arrives exactly when it was always going to arrive. Not faster, not slower. Just when it does. She called on a Tuesday. It was the second week of August, 8 months and a few days after Mitchell's wedding. I was at my desk reviewing a vendor proposal when my phone lit up with her name, still in my contacts, never deleted, though I'm not sure why. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I picked up. Hey, I said. She was crying. Not performance crying. Not the kind of crying people do when they want to create an effect. The kind that's ragged and ungainly and makes it hard to form full sentences. The kind that tells you someone has been holding something very heavy for a while and has finally, in this moment, stopped holding it. I'm sorry, she said first. I know I don't have the right to call you. It's okay, I said. A long pause. Unsteady breathing. She started. Stopped. Started again. I don't really have anyone else I wanted to call. Which is probably also something I should think about. But you were always the person I don't know. You always made things make sense. I didn't say anything. You heard, she said. It wasn't quite a question. Yes, I said. She made a sound. Something between a laugh and a sob that landed in the throat. Of course you did. Everyone heard. I stayed quiet. I feel so stupid, she said. That's the thing. I'm not even mostly heartbroken. I'm just so embarrassed. Because I knew. I think I knew the whole time that he wasn't. I knew what he was. I'd known him before. I knew what he was like. And she stopped. I wanted it to be different. I wanted him to be different. Because the alternative was admitting that what I'd had with you was actually the thing I should have fought for. The room was very quiet. I looked out my office window at the street below. A delivery truck was double parked. 2 people were arguing good-naturedly about directions. I said something terrible to you, she said. At the wedding. In front of everyone. I said it because I was scared, and because Preston was standing there, and because you weren't reacting the way I wanted you to react, and she exhaled. There's no excuse for it. I know that. I know there isn't, I said. Are you angry? I thought about it honestly. No, I said. Not anymore. You should be. Maybe. But I'm not. Silence. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. When you walked out that night, at the wedding, you didn't look back. Not once. I watched you go. You just left. And I remember thinking you'd call, or text, or do something, but you were gone. And I kept waiting. Her voice shifted slightly. Why didn't you fight for it? I thought about that for a long moment. Because fighting for it would have meant fighting against your choice, I said. You made a choice that night. Clearly, in front of a lot of people. Fighting against it would have been fighting against your own decision about what you wanted. That's not something I was willing to do. She was quiet for a while. That's a very mature answer, she said, finally. It's annoying. Despite everything, I almost smiled. I'm sorry, she said again. For the things I said. For the way I handled things. For not seeing what was actually real. I believe you, I said. Is there? She stopped. Started carefully. Is there any version of this where we? No, I said. Gently, but without hesitation. She made a small sound. Acceptance, I think, more than hurt. Like a part of her had already known the answer and had needed to hear it spoken to finally close something. Are you okay? She asked. Actually okay. Yeah, I said. I actually am. I'm glad, she said. And she meant it. I could hear that she meant it. You were always going to be okay. You were always building toward something. I just couldn't see it fast enough. We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing heavy. The kind of conversation two people have when they've said the important things and are letting the line go quiet naturally. She asked about the firm. I told her briefly. She said it sounded good. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in over a year. When she said goodbye, her voice was steadier. I sat at my desk for a while after, phone still in my hand, watching the delivery truck finally pull away from the curb. Then I put the phone down and went back to the proposal. That was 7 months ago. Life continued the way life does when you stop treating it like a stage and start treating it like the actual thing. The firm grew. Lionel and I brought on a third partner in the fall. Someone sharp, someone we'd been watching for a while. Revenue numbers that would have seemed impossible when Meredith was asking me when things would really take off. Real momentum. The kind that comes from 2 years of patient, unglamorous work that nobody applauds until it suddenly becomes obvious. I took a week off in October and drove up the coast with Daryl. Nothing structured. Roadside diners and stupid conversations, and 2 grown men arguing about music for 6 straight hours. I slept better than I had in years. I didn't date anyone seriously. Not out of heartbreak. I was genuinely over that, in the way you get over something when you understand what it actually was. Just because I wasn't in a hurry. There was something deeply satisfying about taking up the full space of my own life without calibrating it against anyone else's expectations. I heard, through the network, that Meredith had left her job and taken a new one. That she'd moved to a different neighborhood, started fresh in a few of the ways you do when something collapses and you decide to use the rubble for building material. I wished her well. Genuinely. I don't think about the wedding often. But sometimes, in the specific way that quiet moments surface old things, I think about the drive home that night. The highway at midnight. The city lights in the distance. How still everything felt. I thought it was the feeling of something ending. Now I think it was the feeling of something beginning. That's the thing about exits that happen without ceremony, without argument, without speeches, without the drama that makes you feel like the loss at least meant something. They make space. Quietly. Completely. For whatever was always supposed to come next. She chose excitement. I chose the work. Only one of us built something that lasted.